Halito, and welcome to Native Chalk Talk, a podcast by natives for all. Here we're keeping our Native ancestors' stories and history alive while also sharing with you our Native cultures, traditions, and more. I'm Rachel Youngman, a Choctaw originally from Anadarko, Oklahoma. I hope you'll enjoy this journey with me as we learn from our Native American guests. And stay tuned for the end of each episode where we'll talk about some great ways to support Native causes and or Native-owned businesses. Let's get started. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Potential is everywhere in the Choctaw people. It's in our schools and students. It's in our small businesses and entrepreneurs. Potential is in our lifestyle and health. It's in our culture and heritage. Passion and commitment is in our blood. Ingenuity and economy are a tradition. And the Choctaw Foundation was founded for this potential. To cultivate minds and hearts, to stimulate ideas and passions, to extend lives and improve health through education, and to preserve and promote the power of our past. The Choctaw Foundation, meeting the potential of the Choctaw people.
You've most likely heard of the Trail of Tears, in which during the removal of the 1800s, the government ripped 60,000 Native Americans from their homelands and placed them into Indian Territory, now Oklahoma. But little is known among most about the unsung heroes, the Choctaw Ponies. For my tribe, the Choctaw, over 2,000 died along this journey of death, and countless amounts of their horses died too. Some brought their horses along the Choctaw Ponies, but just like their humans, not all would survive. These creatures were loyal to their owners, yet despite their strength and beauty, their bodies could only carry them so far. Whether arriving in Indian Territory with their owners on their backs, or walking alongside them, or having given their bodies back to Mother Earth along the way, these ponies were such unsung heroes. And I am here today in Antlers, Oklahoma with my Choctaw guest, Francine Locke Bray, who got to experience the joy of caring for some of the remaining surviving lineage of the very horses who walked this Trail of Tears so long ago. Francine, I am feeling both honored and nostalgic to have this conversation with you today. Yakoki for your time and expertise.
Rachel, thank you, and I'm honored to be asked to do this.
Wonderful. It's kind of like I've been looking forward to this day for a while. So this is a lot of fun. I recall meeting you a few years back, but just virtually at the time. Mm-hmm. And I was researching about the white horse my great-grandmother, also Choctaw, used to ride to get away for a short time from her guardian. He had bought her at age 3 to take over her Indian land allotments and to keep her as a servant. You were kind enough back then to try to find out if that was a Choctaw pony, but we never quite figured it out, but I was grateful for your help though. And now I'm thrilled to learn about your history with the Choctaw Ponies, as well as to dig into the interesting story of your Choctaw family. So why don't you tell me about how you first came into working with these beautiful creatures?
Well, it's kind of a long, convoluted story.
Go for it. We're ready.
I had been told since I was a child that our family had had these special horses that were smaller. Mm-hmm. They were smaller horses. So in 1999, a cousin died in McAllister, and I took over taking care of her archives and kind of mother henning her small museum and archives. So I would come down regularly, and every time I came down, I'd take a drive somewhere, and I was always looking for these ponies.
Yeah.
You know, if I saw smaller horses, I thought, oh, that must be them. That must be them.
Yeah.
You know, but then one day I did answer a query in the Biskinik from Monique Schaefer out east.
And the Biskinik is the Choctaw paper that we received. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and she was looking for whoever was descended from 6 families. The Carters, the Selfs, the Brains, the Helms, the Locks, and I think there's one other. And, of course, I'm descended from the Locke family. My great-grandfather, Victor Locke, married Susan McKinney, And our Choctaw lineage comes from her.
Okay.
Her father was Thompson McKinney, and grandfather was John McKinney. And that I'll speak about him in a minute.
Okay.
So anyways, I responded. It turned out I was the only one who responded to her. Yeah, go figure that one. And we started carrying on a conversation by email. And she said that she was looking on behalf of Bryant Rickman, who had a herd of horses down here. Subsequently, I think it was April of 2009, my sister came down to join me, and I took her on one of my road trips and made an appointment to meet him.
Mm-hmm.
And so we went out to his home in Soper and met him, and that was kind of how I got started. Because he now has, I think, about 500 Spanish Mustangs, and had set aside a group that he felt was pure Choctaw. Wow. Now that they were descended from Choctaw families that had come down through. And one of those families that he had traced the horses through, the man who took care of them before him, was the Locke family. He had,
wow.
Yeah, he had a stallion, Scotty, who was known to have come down through the years from the Lockes. So at the time, the lumber company was forcing horses off the mountain, and he needed quite a bit of help. So I helped start a nonprofit, and we for a number of years, raised funds to help support the horses. Eventually, we had to quit because my husband got sick. He got cancer, and, we just aged, and we couldn't do the handling of the horses anymore. Yeah. And you have to be able to really move safely when you're around horses.
Okay, right.
Not that these are hard to move around. It's just that you always have to remember that they don't think like a human being.
True.
So we aren't doing that now. Now we're doing more of this quiet stuff, research we're doing. But during that time, I started doing a lot of research on my family. Well, I've been doing research on my family for years and years, but added the horse element. So I learned a lot about where the horses had come from, what they had been doing, their Trail of Tears journey, and then how they came to be here. And one story I will tell. John McKinney, whom I mentioned before, was my great-great-great-grandfather, and he owned a stand in Robinson Road in Mississippi, just 10 miles from the main house or office, the offices, near, I think it's Columbia, Mississippi.
Okay. And
he was considered a captain, which is when the people moved, they made a captain out of these groups. And it usually was a town or neighborhood. Someone was in charge of all those people in that neighborhood, we could say. And he was one of those. He was known as Captain John McKinney. I found in my research that there was a letter from him to the government asking, according to the Treaty of Dancing Rabbit Creek, they were to sell all their stock and take very little with them. And he had written the government and said, me and my people are not able to sell them for anything. Nobody wants to pay us for these horses and this cattle. So can we take them? So I always feel like he really had a role in getting the horses to go with.
Thank goodness, too.
Yeah, to go with them. So they brought the horses, and subsequently I found, a friend had sent me bits of a journal kept by a soldier whose responsibility, it turned out, was to move the horses.
What?
Lieutenant Van Horn. Yeah. I did get the book out. The whole journal is in. There's an encyclopedia of the Trail of Tears by Daniel Littlefield. And I subsequently did do a story in Sarah Sawyer's Touch My Tears.
Oh, I love her writing.
Yeah, and in there is the story of Ochaco, and it's taken from that journal. It's the story of a young horse who's making that Trail of Tears journal.
Aww.
And what he encounters. And it was really kind of neat because it was my sister who suggested that we put it in his words, in the horse's words, that. As an elder speaking to the younger horses and telling them their heritage. But that was, to me, that was very exciting. And then along comes Scotty, and my brother in Texas, one of my brothers does have Scotty. And then we subsequently had a group of horses. mainly from the Rickman herd, but they were horses that were eventually descended. Scotty bred prolifically. And 3 of the horses you'll see at Jones Academy are out of Scotty.
Yeah. Oh, really? Okay, so
Yeah.
those are Scotty descendants.
Yeah, Scott, the mother, and 2 young mares. So ask Patrick.
Okay, absolutely.
Yeah, and they're Scotty descendants. But
and what does Ochako mean, if you don't mind my asking?
blue.
Blue. Okay.
He was a blue roan.
Okay.
Yeah, beautiful.
Oh, and what does roan mean?
Brown is kind of their changing color. I think it's from I'm not the expert on this, but I think it's from the bottom up, like their bellies will be changing and then it goes slowly.
It's like an ombre.
Babe in the picture I showed you is a roan. Yeah.
Okay, the brown one. Okay. Oh,
Yeah.
that's so exciting.
So they change. But I apologize to any horse people that know better than that.
Hey, my sisters and I, we had horses growing up, but it was nothing like, we have no idea what their lineage they were from. So you mentioned that they went on this journey of the Trail of Tears. I do encourage anyone to listen to the story of Ochako, which I'm also going to go look up after this. But do you know anything about that story of the Trail of Tears when they were on the trail and then they arrived in Indian Territory? Is there any more about that you know of?
Yeah. It was difficult, very difficult on the trail because they had trouble finding food for the horses. And some people along the way provided it, some didn't. They had swamps to go through and they called it fodder. And we have some copies of receipts. There was a point where someone was going to send them all across at one time on a barge, but that didn't take place, so they mainly had to swim across. And over 2,000 died on the trip. The money value of the horses that they lost at the Trail of Tears was $80,000.
Oh, my Lord. And was that in yesterday's money or today's money?
Yesterday's money.
Whoa.
So
that's a good
when you
amount.
think about what it would be.
It's so
today,
unjust.
It's just, yeah.
So wrong.
So wrong. And then when they got here, what they were promised was never really came through.
No.
And there was a drop that came through and then illness. It was just a constant struggle, just
so
a real
sad.
struggle. Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of people don't realize is there were a lot of Choctaws in Mississippi that were actually very prominent, doing very well. They had big farms, they had horses and chickens, and it'd just be like literally someone coming into your house today and saying, you're no good, we're going to move you somewhere else. You have no idea what you're walking into. And by the way, you have to walk there.
In 1835, the Choctaws made a claim against the government, and I thought it would be a document of everything, and it's 99% of the document is lost horses.
Wow, really?
Yeah, it's over 2,300 lost horses, and what's wonderful about the document is it names the person who owned the horses, how many horses they lost, and the value of the horses. And I think at that time they were valuing a horse at like $60.
And isn't there some kind of initiative right now to try to reclaim some of that loss for the tribe?
There has been for ever since.
Oh,
yeah. It's called the net proceeds. And what it is descendants of people who moved on the Trail of Tears were filing to get paid back for what they were owed, literally owed, for leaving their properties and their stock and all. To me, what they're most important for, the net proceeds, is it lists, like in my family, John McKinney's first wife. They had 4 children, 3 daughters and a son, and I knew that, but he took a second wife.
Okay.
Which, as Thompson said, he kept a journal.
So in a polygamous way, he had 2 wives.
Well, that was a common thing with Choctaws
totally.
at the time, was to have a second wife. Well, she was a Renaissance woman, and she wasn't going to have it. So she packed up her 4 children, and she got out of there and went west to Yellowbusha, and she remarried a man by the name of Isaac Nelson. Thompson McKinney, her son, by John McKinney, did a journal. And in the 1850s, he wrote this journal, And he tells this story, but he doesn't name anybody, not even his father, his mother, his sisters, anybody, except for his stepfather, who he doesn't really care for because he's not his real father.
But thank God for the journal, though, because don't we all wish we had an ancestor who kept a journal?
It's wonderful because it's been a mainstay for research. Through it, we found out his father had eventually become chief of the Mush District, 1838 to 1842. We find out through the net proceeds files. We never knew her name, and I had references to an Ishtamona or a Stamona, but wasn't sure. And sure enough, in the net proceeds, why they're worth researching is there she is. And names her children,
nice,
plus her children's spouses, and in one part, her grandchildren. So you have it all kind of laid out
for people researching their Native American side of their family. We all know those little nuggets make all the difference.
Well, we had finally found an obituary for her written by a son from her second marriage, which really made that link solid.
Okay.
The Nelsons here were descended from her second marriage, but he never named her. And that's a Choctaw. He just called her Mother Nelson. So we had Mother Nelson, and I thought Ishtamona or Stamona, and then we run into Betsy Nelson, and then takes us back with John McKinney to Stamona. She was known as shortened Stamona. So we finally have,
and it's nice when we can honor those who came before us by putting a name in there, or just when you see a photo or something like that makes us go, okay, you're still here. We haven't forgotten you.
So my next thing is I'd like to find her grave, but I don't know that I'm going to.
I hope you do, and keep me updated, because I'd love to know how that goes.
Yeah, my guess is it's in the Nelson Cemetery in Antlers, where the Nelson's chapel was, but it's probably unmarked.
Yeah. So many of those unmarked graves. We definitely have a lot of those in our family too.
So
wow. And by the way, for our listeners, I'm going to make sure to put some information about these Choctaw Ponies and about, you'll see some photos of Francine and myself in front of her horse, who was, tell me the name again.
His name was Red Pine.
Red Pine.
Yeah, and his name came from Victor Locke, my great-grandfather, came from Tennessee after the Civil War, and they raised thoroughbreds.
Okay.
And the horse, the story goes lots of ways as to how and why he left Tennessee. But he was headed to Mexico. He was not going to repledge to the United States. He was a diehard Confederate.
Gotcha.
But he left on one of the thoroughbreds, and his name was Red Pine.
Red Pine. And I love that, like, in the front of your home, you have this beautiful painting of red pine. And that's when my listeners go to my Facebook or Instagram page, Native Chalk Talk, you'll get to see beautiful red pine, and we'll keep his memory alive that way too in the photo. So these ponies truly are rare, right? I mean, how many do you suppose are in existence today?
They have been on the Livestock Conservancy follows them and did DNA testing, and they have been following them since the late 70s.
Wow.
At one time, they were extremely rare. Now, I think there's over 3,000, possibly up to 5,000.
That's great. I mean, that's more than I would have thought, and even then, they still are rare as far as numbers go. But do you know how many it started with in the 1970s? Surely there were a lot less then, right?
There were, but I don't know how many. I don't know that I've seen a number. The ones from here were mainly up on Blackjack Mountain, and they were running in the area in the mountains.
Oh, where is Blackjack Mountain?
You're right at the base of Blackjack Mountain.
Oh, we are right now?
Yeah,
okay.
right.
I don't know Antlers as well, and it is beautiful out here. It's gorgeous, like rolling green fields and trees everywhere. Okay, so we're at the base of Blackjack Mountain, and these ponies just
and Blackjack Mountain runs east and west. And some people call it, I think, Horse Mountain. It was just a wild area. It was known for housing outlaws, horses. And in the 50s, a man came in from Texas. He had been born, I think, in Oklahoma, and his name was Gilbert Jones. And he moved up onto the mountain and started tracking and keeping
Nice.
numbers, or whatever. And
thanks to
so
him.
for many years, a lot of people just went to him if they wanted a horse.
Okay. And then so when you decided to, I assume at one point you decided to start procuring these ponies, or you started the nonprofit, right? Mm-hmm. And so how did that, from day one, what did that look like?
It was mainly just to raise funds. And we I have a friend who now runs the nonprofit, Mila Coleman, and she was wonderful with Facebook and a website.
That's great.
And then we let people come and see the horses, and if they wanted to buy, we refer them to either to one of the two ranchers that we knew to buy, and they could come and meet the people if they wanted. That was mainly how we did it, and we'd pay for the feed at the co-op, and then hunt up hay, did that kind of thing. Babe kind of came to me as a gift, and he was born, and I just kind of took to him.
Yeah.
And he was named after one of my great uncles that was a rancher. Died in 1913. Yeah. His nickname was Babe. So we just called him Babe.
Aww.
But that's how I acquired him, and then the other ones were my brother's offspring for Scotty. Scotty's descendants are well known out east for doing, I'm not sure about dressage, but they're jumpers and pull wagons and stuff like that. They perform
strong.
Yeah, very strong horses. These are very strong horses.
I love that. And so, I mean, that takes me to my next question. What is their physical appearance? Are they shorter or taller than the average horse? Are they built differently?
Okay, and I was trying to think. I hadn't thought about it in a while. They tend to be shorter.
Okay.
4 to 4.5 hands high.
Okay.
They have a narrower chest. And I don't know if this is actually official, but to me, the head is smaller and a very different shape. It's just very, once you've seen one and you know the head, and how they look. I never thought, to me, a horse was a horse.
Right, of course.
And, yeah, of course. But once I got to know Scotty and his offspring, I could pick the Scotty offspring out anyway.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, it's funny because you said, I have to think about it for a minute because it's been a while, because you were around Choctaw Ponies then for so long that you're probably like, what does a regular horse look like at this point? I don't even know.
Yeah, and they have their rump slopes. You can always tell, quarter horses and other horses are very rounded, and their tail is high up on their rump. With the Choctaw, it's not, and that's where the very long tail that can drag the ground comes in. And some have very long manes.
So cool.
Yeah, and they just are very alert.
Well, yeah, I mean, what is their temperament typically like then?
They were bred by the Choctaw people to be very gentle.
Isn't that so how the Choctaw people... And even like their statue, they're a little shorter. Choctaw people are a little shorter. They're like, we need a horse that we can jump onto.
Yeah. People would call them, when I first came, a lot of people called them pot-bellied horses.
Oh, so cute.
And so they were chunkier. But part of their history is with the Choctaw people is that once they acquired them, one of the things in the early 1800s they would do with them is they would, when their children were too big to ride on the mother's back, they would strap them to the horse.
Whoa.
That's how the child maneuvered around.
Are you serious?
I'm serious. Wow. And I can I even read once where it was when they were 5, they were unstrapped, they walked, and they were expert horsemen. And
here today we coddle our kids. We're like, don't go outside. You might get a splinter or something.
Not then. They didn't then. But they would give a child, when it was born, 2 ponies, a mare and a colt. And the same with cattle and the same with hogs. And so that by the time they reached adulthood, they had their own herds.
So smart.
Yeah.
We should do that now. Everybody gets a pony and a hog, a cow. But that's interesting, though, that they strap. It's like throwing your baby in the swimming pool to teach them how to swim. It's like, I'm strapping you to this horse, and don't you get off until you know how to ride this thing.
Until you know how to ride this thing. So, and if you think about it, they were probably maybe at the most a year old.
Wow.
when they were put on that horse.
It's so young.
Yeah.
But, I mean, that was part of their culture. And,
Yeah.
I mean, the Choctaw were not nomadic, so they didn't use these horses to, travel around. They used them probably for farming. And like you said, they wanted them to be bred to be gentle so that even the children could get on them.
Yeah.
Fascinating.
Initially, they used them for carrying. They would travel far to hunt.
Okay.
Like they would come into this area, the Caddo area specifically, steal horses. The family would go and the husbands would do the killing of the deer or whatever. And then it was the wife's responsibility to go back. I was rereading something where it said one of the missionaries had said he would, the hunter would go back to camp and then point to the woman and say, well, it's way down there.
Woman, go get it.
Go get it.
I hunted, you go get it. Man, that's why the Choctaw women are strong.
Yes. And see, when horses came along, then it made them more mobile because they could carry the kill.
It's amazing. All the tribes benefited so much from the horses coming into their worlds. And so if we did step back a little bit, the Spaniards originally brought, I guess, most of the horses, and then somehow the Choctaw lineage came down from that, right? I mean, the Choctaw Pony lineage.
The Spaniards, Ian Thompson, he has 2 articles called Like a Deer, Isoba Like a Deer.
Oh, okay.
And he has said that they came in I think it was 1540s with the Spanish. And then the Spanish slowly came north, and then there was the Battle of Mobila, and a lot of horses were lost then. And the natives that lived in Mobila were all killed, but the Choctaws weren't. And so they started acquiring horses from that, and then from also the Caddo on hunting trips. And so it was a gradual movement north with the horses.
Wow. And you've shown us some pictures of the horses that used to be here in this area, and they're absolutely beautiful. And then even down the street, you said there's still a couple of Choctaw ponies that belong to someone else.
One stallion and 2 mares.
Okay.
And if everything goes through, there should be in another month or 2 quite a number of Choctaw horses out there.
See, you'll still get to look at them. And so did you ride the horses when you had them around here? Nice.
Yeah, I did some, not a whole lot, but I did ride.
Yeah.
And they're very comfortable to ride. They're just, to me, for especially a woman my size, I'm about 5'3", they're the right size.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you ride bareback or with a saddle?
And they have to generally have a smaller saddle than they have higher withers than the other horses. They always protected those withers because they were taller. The
hard part of the story is that you recently donated your babies to the Choctaw boarding school Jones Academy, correct? Yeah. In which my sister and I are heading there later today. But I bet that was a hard and tough decision. But nevertheless, they're in great hands. The kids love tending to them. Getting to see them in person today when we go to Hartshorn to Jones Academy is going to be such a pleasure. I'll be sure to take pictures for you. But I'll say hello to them. And by the way, listeners, be sure again to check out my Native Choctaw Facebook or Instagram pages to see all of the things that we're talking about and my trip later to Jones Academy. So I assume you must really miss them.
I do miss them, but for a long time I had known that they needed my perspective coming here and my friend who runs the nonprofit now is, if you don't make a permanent decision about these horses, what's going to happen to them? A lot of people take them and release them on the mountain. That's been quarter horses, any kind of horse. You say, well, I can't take care of it, or somebody's died.
I can't believe people
away they go.
Do that.
So for a long time, I had really wanted the Choctaw Nation to have a bunch of the horses, to have some of the horses. And there had been an effort several years ago, about 8 years ago, and it fell through. And then when my husband got sick in late 2018, he was like the pasture manager. He would go out and brush hog and do what needed, and he felt very comfortable with horses. But I knew with that we had to hire a young man who became our pasture manager. And I knew that now was the time we had to do something. So last October, one of the horses, there's a kind of pink horse.
Oh.
Yeah, Buster,
Buster.
who has his own book even. He has his own book.
That's
Yes.
so cute.
Dream a Pony. Because I thought about it and I thought, I know who could really use the horses and has space for them.
They have hundreds of acres out there.
Let's just see if Jones Academy will take them. So Sanders started working on it, and sure enough, Patrick was more than glad.
Yeah.
And he's a Pawnee himself. Pawnee?
Yes, ma'am, Pawnee. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and himself, so he knows horses. And so he was more than glad to take the horses. So last October, in the middle of COVID, we trekked horses to and from the vets we sent 8. Wow. And I'm still thinking of getting my brother to send Scotty there.
Yeah.
Because I know Scotty will be safe there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And he'll probably be so glad to be with his relatives.
Well, especially the one mare, because she's his long time, the one he'd been with the longest, you know. But we just went to work with it. We got them trekked back and forth from the vet for their coggins, and then Patrick and his 2 helpers came in. They're both Choctaw, and they came down here, and we loaded. We had the 3, the mare and her 2 offspring did not want to get loaded. They refused, so they did not go the first time. And they were kind of in horse heaven, and they didn't want to go. So, but we trekked up to Hortshorn. And had
which is also Horse Haven. I mean, it's beautiful up there too. There's lots of land.
Mm-hmm. Well, when we pulled up, we were just like, oh my God, there's nothing wrong with this decision, because they had just baled hay, and they had 900 bales of hay. That group of 5 got dropped off, and 3 were ours, and then a sister had a horse, and then Silver in Oregon. Hers was Buster, and then Don Onifree in Louisiana.
Okay.
And Palomino. Oh, and then Mila Coleman sent a black mare.
Okay.
She sent one of her horses. So we had kind of a little group.
I talked to Patrick on the phone the other day, and, in preparation for my coming to see them at Jones, and he was beaming about it. He said, I knew the minute we started talking about this that he was like, this is a dream. I knew this was the right thing. It was just a feeling. And I was like, that must make Miss Francine feel a lot better.
It really does. I've been so glad that it worked out, and that he wanted them, and the children can have them. And I know I don't have to worry about those
Absolutely.
horses. And we can see them anytime we want. Exactly. And our families can come. And like Sarah's coming in September.
Nice.
And bringing her daughter, because her daughter had never seen Buster. There's strawberry. Now that's a strawberry roan.
Oh,
so
really?
when you go there, that's a real roan, strawberry roan. He's a real good one.
And that book is called Dream a Pony. We need our listeners to go out and find that book.
Yes,
I assume
it is sold through the Choctaw Nation.
Okay, great.
And,
Perfect.
It was really neat. His horse trainer, Billy, sent Sarah, I think, a picture a little while later of the kids sitting around him, and he was reading them with the horses.
Oh my gosh.
Reading them the story.
That's so cute. I love it. I love it.
I
was going to show you a picture of one of my relatives, if I can find it. She's on a white horse. This is a great aunt of mine. But I wondered if you thought by any chance that was a Choctaw pony of any sort. If not,
she
it won't
kind of might be a little bit big.
Okay, a little too big then. All right, it's a no-go. It's a no-go on that horse, so no worries.
Because see, on the Choctaw ponies, a lot of times their legs are down. Now, this is a group, my great-grandfather's there, but the Livestock Conservancy said that they were Choctaw ponies. That's pre-1910.
Oh, so cool. Yeah, they are smaller, aren't they? Because
the men usually look too big.
Right. And we also know that these men already were probably small if they're Choctaw, right?
Well, I know my great-grandfather was. He was white, but I know he was smaller.
Okay. Yeah.
He wasn't a big man.
Let's see. So before I shift gears, is there anything else you want our listeners to know about the Choctaw ponies and any of their history or anything like that?
They're hard-working horses. They can do anything from show to herding cattle.
Very versatile then.
Very versatile, very gentle. If you get to know them, we have a friend in Muskogee, outside Muskogee, who has several, and she just goes out and sits in her pasture. Now, I don't recommend it unless you know your horses. And they just come up around her. And they're very good if you take your time and understand them. And,
it's about trust, mutual trust.
And just very gentle.
My last thoughts when we talk about the ponies are the fact that they came over on the Trail of Tears. They were survivors just like their owners. Tough little Choctaw ponies.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for sharing about that. And now I want to shift gears a bit and talk about this beautiful land in which your Choctaw ponies used to roam. So let's talk about your town, a place your Choctaw ancestors founded. Actually, I was doing some research and I just kept uncovering different interesting pieces of your history. I hope you don't mind. I looked you up. It's supposed that the town of Antlers gained its name from some antlers that were secured to a tree that marked a spring that was nearby. And 3 Choctaw families settled near the Cuniotupi Spring. And one of those family members was your great-grandfather, correct? Do you agree with what I have found so far? Okay.
I'm not sure about the 3 families. I know of 2. The story we have had handed down is that Judge Parker was approached. They were trying to lay out the land for the railroads, and he asked this Captain John Farr to come into this area to do it, but he told him, he said, the person you need to go see is Victor Locke. They were living here by Dela.
Okay.
They had what was called Loxton, then White Church, now Dela. That area.
Okay.
And he said, if anybody knows the land, he knows the land, so get him and take him with you. So Victor, John Farr, and Victor's oldest son, Shub, are the ones that came in, and Victor had rheumatoid arthritis, apparently, and he loved the spring. And it's still there, but they've closed it up, and there is a movement in town to open it up.
Oh, that's interesting.
But for your sake, I wanted to tell you.
Yeah.
You are sitting on John Farr's land.
Right now, huh?
Yep.
Oh, so that's why my GPS said Farr Lane.
Farr Lane, yes.
That's Farr. Okay.
John Farr. The house across the road was their original house from over 100 years ago. The cabin next door to the north of us, which is being renovated, was the second one, and this is his granddaughter, built this house.
No way.
Yeah.
Wow. So we're sitting on very historical land.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And that was about 1886, I think, 85 or 86. And Victor, I guess, went home and told his wife and all his kids were moving. So they had their own little community there with a blacksmith shop and a store and a mill, grist mill. And
sounds like they did pretty well for themselves.
They did. Yeah. They did. He was very astute. He started out working for Robert Jones when he came into the territory, and then just went on from there. And he became extremely popular with the Choctaws. And his wife, that we were always told, she wanted him to be chief, but he couldn't. But his son became chief. One of his sons.
Speaking of, so he was chief of the Choctaw Nation for 7 years, starting in 1910, correct? And what was his name?
Victor Locke Jr.
Victor Locke, very original. And of course, your name is Francine Locke is your maiden name, and then Bray is your married name, correct? Yeah. So that Locke name is popular around here.
Yes. Well, they had 10 children. Not that many are left, but my folks had 9 children.
Okay.
5 boys and 4 girls.
Wow.
And my grandfather was Victor's younger son, Edwin Snow Locke, who was known as...
an interest.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a big Choctaw name, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
When you said Alec before, in my great-aunt's writing, she said that mother named the children, father gave them nicknames. And my grandfather's nickname was Alexander Hamilton, but he was known as Alec.
What?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, we just learned a little bit about Oklahoma history.
Yeah.
Okay.
So he, and when I first started coming down here on a regular basis, and people would say, well, who are you descended from? Because they knew Victor only had a daughter and she had no children. Victor Jr. I said, from Edwin Snow. And they'd look at me, well, we don't know who that is. And then finally I started saying, Alex. Alec. I would say Alec. Oh, we know who that is. He
Oh.
left.
He still has the name,
But
town
he
name
still
named
had
after him.
the nickname. Yeah. Alec.
That's
So,
really interesting. I
yeah,
had no idea.
so-
You have a lot of roots here.
It's just, well, and we have our own family cemetery here. So all these people are, he's not buried. My grandfather's buried in Chicago because that's where they ended up.
Okay.
Yeah. And his sister referred to him as her English brother. His mother died when he was 10 and he was sent to Sacred Heart Mission out by Atoka,
Okay.
Kanawha, and literally spent the next 10 years, minus one. One was spent in Subiaco in
Okay.
Arkansas. When the school burned in Sacred Heart, they sent him to Subiaco, and he became a monk eventually. He gave up the monkdom to become a priest. 1912, he sailed for England he was going to Rome to become a priest, but he got waylaid by my grandmother. He
What can
met
you
her
do?
on the boat, and I don't think he ever made it. We've, for years and years and years, debated whether he ever made it to Rome or not, and I don't think he ever did because of the ship they took back. I have the ship that they sailed on,
Wow.
and they sailed back on the same ship. They were booked to go on the Titanic and missed the Titanic.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So
Now that's a story.
and they sailed on the next ship, the Mauritania, back to the
Whoa.
United States.
I wonder what they thought when they heard that news.
Yeah, well, it's been very interesting because we have a prayer card and a memorial card, a service, that
Yeah.
the Mauritania did when they sailed over that spot.
And so they called him the English.
His sister did, she referred, and he was blonde. One of the artifacts I have from him is his bow, but it was a fishing bow. It was a fishing. Ian was able to come out to our house several years ago, and when we were still in Indiana, and identified it as a fishing boat.
There
Yeah.
you go.
Yeah.
That's-
So
I love your story. There's just so much. I feel like we could probably go another 3 hours, and if you didn't have an appointment, because there's so much to talk about. So I was reading that in 1887, a post office was established, and the St. Agnes Academy, which is different than the Sacred Heart, right?
uh-huh.
And that academy was established for the Choctaws in 1897. And Chief Locke, who is that your great grandpa or your grandpa?
No, it's my great uncle.
Oh, your great
And
uncle.
that
Okay.
is one thing where I don't think he ever went there.
He would have been too old.
And
Online it says he was the very first
he was
student
the very first baptized.
baptized. Okay.
He was the very
Okay.
first Choctaw baptized. He and Father Ketchum became very close friends. And
Huh.
what I found out recently in doing research on St. Agnes, I've been doing that, and therefore I got into a lot of Father Ketchum, and I found out that Father Ketchum learned Choctaw, but he wanted to translate the catechism into Choctaw, so it was Victor Locke, Peter Hudson, and Spring, his last name was Spring, who translated the Catholic catechism into Choctaw.
Okay.
And I've located a couple of I have yet to see one yet, but I don't know what happened to Victor's copy. But that's
Fascinating.
1916 that was done. They were very close, and he was very much loved down here, and he really started the parish.
Wow. And there are some people that are like, oh, there's certain boarding schools or churches that were trying to, kind of colonize, whiten up the native kids. And I found some very, very favorable things about St. Agnes. So it sounds like it was, he had a heart for the Choctaw people.
We never really have heard. I've not found in anything where people are really, complaining. And I had a elderly cousin who was 98 when he died about 5 years ago. And he had actually gone to St. Agnes.
Oh, no way.
He would talk about it, yeah.
Really? Did he say anything interesting about it? Really,
he just loved the nuns and loved being
Wow.
there.
Okay,
Yeah.
well, there's a real account for you.
And you figure that's in the 20s that he was talking.
Yeah.
So.
And there were still some bad things going on then
Yeah.
at that time. I mean, it's like Jones Academy, too. You'll be hard-pressed to find. No school is going to be perfect, but there's a lot of good accounts from Jones Academy. And that, of course, was started by a prominent Choctaw man. So, it's a little bit different than, say, the government starting something and handing it to, say, a Catholic parish or something like that. But In 1945, an Okie tornado came through. I'm sure you and I have both experienced many an Okie tornado. And it destroyed the poor school, and they never rebuilt it, right?
It literally destroyed everything
on
there. I would love to see pictures of Antlers Main Street before the tornado.
Oof.
We have pictures in the depot, the Historical Society, of afterwards from Fort Mackey when the soldiers came and took pictures. And they say it was lined with beautiful homes.
Oh.
And then the church and that whole complex.
Just gone.
But yeah, the nuns took the children into an inner hall, and that literally was the only area that wasn't demolished.
Wow, they were spared because of those nuns thinking in the right way. In fact, 69 people died from that tornado, and it's considered one of the 3 deadliest in the history of Oklahoma. However, at that time, President Franklin D. Roosevelt died on that same day, so the story was just basically overshadowed by his news of his death.
Yeah.
And yet it was one of the biggest ones
My great aunt, I have a family of writers behind me, and she and one of hers talks about, if I could survive, I survived the tornado, I can survive anything.
Heck yeah. And that's Okie strong.
And she was a strong woman. So
that's great.
But people talk about that still today.
Wow.
And what you see downtown isn't what was there at all before.
It's too bad.
It just came through that main street and just everything on.
Go to the depot in Antlers, Oklahoma, and we'll get to see, photos and
pictures.
Old.
That's where the Push County Historical Society is housed.
Okay. Oh, that would be so fun to go see.
Yeah. And there's just a lot of stuff there, especially on a Tuesday. Kay Black is there, and she's like the county historian.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So today, Antlers has approximately 2,500 residents and is in the beautiful Kiamichi River Valley. And side note, my great-great-grandfather Tom Davis, who was angered by the Dawes Act of 1887, went on a bloody rampage in the Kiamichi River area, killing a white man. He killed others as well, but this one made the papers as it was so brutal. And he was sentenced to hang, but was pardoned by President Grover Cleveland. So to be in this area is a bit surreal.
Oh, yeah.
I'd love to figure out where that was. I know I probably never will.
What was the name of the man?
It was Lee Crum. C-R-U-M.
Oh, I've heard that name.
Oh, really? Okay. We should definitely talk then.
I will ask Kay about it.
Okay. Oh, thank you. That would be great, because I haven't been able to find anything on Lee, because the story, it's so bloody. I don't even want to go into it on here, but he suffered greatly. And then there's nothing about him or his family or his ancestors or anything that I can find anywhere. So I bet she would know something. And I'm just talking purely when I Google it. So, interesting.
Have you ever seen a book called Crime and Punishment?
Yeah.
I'm wondering if there's something in there.
I will look. And see, this is the thing that people are researching on their ancestors about, is just to talk. You know, we talk to each other, and then sometimes you take away a nugget or I take away a nugget. And so people sometimes ask me, how do you know so much about your family? I'm like, I make a fool out of myself. I go talk to anybody that will listen to me. Yeah, and then I ask them too, what are you looking for? And tell me about your family. And well, it has truly been a pleasure to meet the woman behind the beautiful and rare Choctaw Ponies, who truly are alive today because of, partly because of your labor of love and ensuring they continue to carry on in a safe and loving environment for the future. Yakoki, my friend.
Yakoki.
The Choctaw Nation has always provided a foundation upon which a future can be built. From our home in southeast Oklahoma to a bingo hall that grew to be one of the largest casinos in the world. Today's summer school programs lay the groundwork for a love of learning. Small business programs support local economies. And with over 10,000 jobs created, Choctaw offers financial stability to tribal members and our neighbors. Together we build success, because together we're more.
Thanks for listening to Native Chalk Talk. Be sure to join our community on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Simply search for Native Chalk Talk. That's Native, CHOCTALK. And check us out at nativechalktalk.com. Stay tuned for the next episode. You're going to love it. Yakoki. Thank you, my friends.